Okay, right, so today we're going to have a go at producing work in the style of an artist called Sunga Park. And Sunga Park is a North Korean artist, and she illustrates, she's mainly an illustrator who sometimes sketches buildings and uses watercolours, but she does a huge amount of things. So if you want to go and have a look on her website, it's really well worth it. She produces portraits in watercolours, and she often designs wallpaper. She does commissions. Have a look, there's lots of things that she does. Okay, before we can go into or think about the sort of primary sources or secondary sources we need to have ready in order to create a piece of work in her style, we need to think about how she's produced her work. So first of all, well, straight away you can see, think about the things that you can see, it'd be worth jotting them down. It looks like she uses watercolours and inks. She uses ink pen for the details of buildings. These are quite large. Don't be fooled by that they're quite small on my piece of paper. They're usually really large. They're half a metre tall or wide. So it gives her lots of room to move a paintbrush and sort of play with the watercolours and try and get those lovely mixed colours that bleed into each other. So she's added detail. She's been very selective about where she's added the detail. So I need to think about that when I'm preparing my images and photographs as well. She needs to see the details. She would have gone on her travels and taken sketches of these and taken photos. Because I can't get out today, I'm using secondary sources from the internet. But it would always be a good idea if you can to go out and take your own photos or even sketch. That would be even better because you can position yourself in the right place and sit there. So she's been quite selective. She's made sure that there's outlines of many of the buildings with areas that are detailed. This one, for instance, it kind of stops there, doesn't it? There's nothing, apart from this little bit here, there's nothing further down. This one, the detail's broken up a little bit more, so there's nothing round here. And this bit and these bits look a little bit more separate, but you know what? Your brain fills in the gaps, doesn't it? Your brain thinks, okay, they are together, it is one building. But she's just selected areas. So don't be worried about how much detail you put in. Think about the detail you put into your drawing and think about how much you're going to leave out. I suppose how much you leave out is more important sometimes than what you put in. This one, for instance, it's almost outlines with a very small amount of detail. She's tried to create drips here, which actually to try and create drips that look like almost accidents on purpose is really quite difficult, especially with watercolours. There's areas you can see where the water, where she's added the water to the paper and then put paint on top, because there's hard edges around here. That tells me that that paper didn't have water put on it at all, where this bit here would have been soaked with water. It looks like when she starts her painting, it looks like she's adding water or lots of paint to the top of the outlines and then washing her brush and then adding lots of water and leaving areas where she doesn't add water at all. and then moving the paint about and possibly having some sort of tissue or sponge to mop up. So I need to think what images would suit this style. I've chosen buildings, but you can use portraits. You could use still life objects. You could use anything really to create this style, as long as you follow the characteristics, which are areas of detail, areas where there isn't any detail, with a really interesting kind of wash underneath where the colours bleed. We'll talk about the colours a little bit more after we've got our image prepared. So we'll move this out of the way. I've got 3 images. This one is like the corner of Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery in town. I thought it'd be quite interesting because often Sunga Park's work looks like it's produced fairly close, and the building looks very tall, so she's standing fairly close. I thought this one would be quite good because there's some nice perspective as well, and there's some fairly good detail. It's not hugely great, but there is fairly good detail. I could create some detail around this clock and maybe around the edges there, maybe add some windows in, and think about leaving a lot of this area out completely. I also chose this photograph, another secondary photograph from the internet, but we did visit Oxford earlier in the term, in the academic year, so you might have some images from Oxford, which would be great if their primary source is brilliant. I quite like this image because, again, there's some perspective. It's fairly close, it's not too far away. You've got some interest in the roof details here, and you've got some nice Gothic looking windows, and you've got this doorway as well. So thinking about this piece of work, for instance, it might be quite interesting to do something where there's sort of central detail and outlines that are kind of washed away more at the edges, and maybe add some drips like it is here. So we've got that option as well. We've got this one, again another one from Oxford. It's the Radcliffe Radcliffe camera. We haven't got the whole building, but I don't mind that really, because maybe I put this at the top of my painting or my top of my drawing, and I add in some details, and the rest could be sort of just watercolour wash anyway. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a go at drawing these out. I have some tracing paper here, okay, so you can see that underneath. If you haven't got tracing paper, if someone in your house enjoys baking, you might have some grease-proof baking paper in the cupboard, which is what you line tins with, which, if you haven't got tracing paper, is a cheap alternative. This is actually really good for making patterns of clothes, because you can see through it and it's fairly cheap, but also, yeah, great for tracing images. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a fairly, not a too soft pencil, and I'm going to just draw out the details that I think should go into the work. So I'm not going to draw it all out. I'm just going to draw out some of the details. As I do it, I'm going to get some masking tape, and I'm going to make sure the picture is securely down. And also I'm going to make sure this has a couple of tabs of masking tape. So when I feel, or I think that I might have done enough, I can put a piece of blank paper, if I had some blank paper, I'll just use this as demonstration, underneath so I could see where my lines are, and then make a decision whether I need to add a little bit more. Be sparing with your detail. Think about outline and think about adding some, not all. Okay, I suppose if you feel as though you've added too much, you can always rub it out so it's not a huge problem. Okay, and then once I've done that, I'll get back to you and show you what I've done.